This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, one of your favorite channels on YouTube, and we're back at you this week with another great story. You can see the title right on your screen. Cheating girlfriend and her parents went psycho after I ghosted her. Now let's get into this story and see what it's all about. He starts out and he says, "Take this post for what it's worth. I think it will be helpful for some and to others just an entertaining read. This saga all started about 9 years ago when I was 24 and my then girlfriend was 22. For this post, I'll refer to my girlfriend as Melissa and to myself as Nigel. At the time, I had been working for about 2 years as an account manager for a well-known tech company. I moved to the city for this job, and while I loved the work and was making phenomenal money, I was lost and very lonely. Being so far away from friends and family and in a strange place, I threw myself into my job. I used dating apps and went out on occasion to bars but only had a few dates, nothing serious. Then one day I was out at a local place by myself listening to a band and noticed Melissa. She walked into the bar and sat down on one of the stools. I watched her from a table thinking this pretty girl has to be there waiting for someone. I then saw her place an order with the bartender. When she got her drink, she turned to watch the band. I thought to myself, this girl is all alone. As luck or unluck would have it, a stool opened up right beside her and I headed over there to claim it. I asked her if the seat was taken. She replied no, it was all mine. When the band took a break, she and I started talking and immediately bonded. She had recently moved to the city for work and was feeling kind of lost too. From that night on, things moved quickly for us. We had our first date that very weekend and officially became an exclusive couple a week later. I was head over heels in love, and again in this story I have to tell the OP, no, you were not head over heels in love after just a week of dating. You were in lust, my friend. I have to admit back then I felt like she was an angel sent to fill the deep empty void in my life. After about a month, she basically started living at my place, even though she still had a small apartment of her own. A few months later her lease came up and instead of renewing it, I asked her to move in with me after just 5.5 months of dating. Big mistake there, moving in just after 5.5 months. What are you thinking? I really thought I had found the one. So this guy was just totally smitten, you can see that. My parents like Melissa. While her parents gave me bad vibes, her dad is a high school football coach and gym teacher. He initially hardly spoke to me and barely made eye contact. In fact, when we met I extended my hand but he just turned away. I got the sense the guy didn't like me. Her mom was just obnoxious. She's one of those loud, overbearing people who are really unpleasant to be around. You know the type. When we announced we were moving in together, my parents expressed their displeasure saying it was too soon. Well, you should have listened to your parents. Her parents blew a gasket until they found out I would be paying 75% of the rent and expenses including food. They seemed okay with it, though not completely happy. As time went on, my relationship with Melissa got better and better. Things were going so well that I started thinking about when I would pop the question. Even her wacky parents started treating me with respect and as part of the family, especially after I got a big promotion and no longer required Melissa to pay anything to live with me. Another big mistake. I don't care what she's earning. You've got to make her contribute. All of a sudden, they saw me as future son-in-law material and started visiting us a few times each month, he says, unfortunately. Melissa's dad, who treated me like dirt before, started treating me like his best friend after I took him to several professional sports games and we sat and ate in my company's luxury box. Even though his sentiment changed, I never trusted the guy. I just had a bad feeling about him. He seemed to be a powder keg of rage just waiting to explode at any minute. More about this later. So everything for Melissa and I was going great until around the 9th month of our cohabitation. It was then I started to notice a few subtle changes that immediately sparked my suspicion. The first was one day when I walked up on her while she was texting and she nearly jumped out of her skin and hid her phone away from my view. Her excuse for acting like that was she claimed I startled her. Well, that's your first red flag. The next was just the sheer volume of texts she was getting. When I questioned this, she said it was just from her work colleagues. I noticed right after that the number of texts she was getting nearly stopped, only to find out later it was because she silenced the alerts. Red flag number 2. Then she started taking her phone to bed with her and putting it on her nightstand instead of on the charger alongside my phone on our dresser. Red flag number 3. Taking that phone and keeping it close to her even when she's sleeping. I knew at that point something was going on and her phone held all the answers. One night she fell asleep and left her bedside lamp on. I got up and went around to her side to turn it off. She was sound asleep, so I thought this would be my chance to snoop. I picked up her phone and entered the code, but she had changed it. Red flag number 4. I'm assuming previously he knew what her passcode was. Now all of a sudden out of the blue she changed it and didn't advise him. That's a definite red flag. I then tried holding the phone in front of her face to open it, but since her eyes were closed the facial recognition didn't work. I hit a dead end but knew her changing her password without telling me was another sign she was hiding something. Then that Saturday, through an odd twist of fate, I was able to get into her phone. She and I were sitting at the kitchen table and I noticed she left her phone in the living room on top of the TV. Apparently her mom had been trying to call her, but since she had the phone silenced we didn't hear it. Her mom then called me and I handed Melissa my phone to talk to her. The two of them started talking about some nonsense I can't remember, but they were heavy into conversation. Just before her mom called, Melissa was about to head out to the store to grab a few things for our lunch. I think she forgot she was using my phone and said to me she was going to run out to the store. I said okay and she continued talking to her mother as she left the apartment, leaving me there alone with her phone. As soon as she got outside I locked the door behind her and went to retrieve her phone, hoping the auto lock hadn't kicked in. Thankfully it didn't and I was able to get right in. What I found was a string of text messages between her and a person listed as Sharon Work. This is how she had all of her coworkers labeled in her phone, so she obviously did this as a decoy. I had never heard her speak of this Sharon before, and when I read the messages I found out that Sharon was actually a guy from her office. I'll call him Rob. I had never met Rob before but found out later he was 39 years old and he and his wife had just entered into an open marriage. Their first text dated back a little over 2 weeks prior, which just so happened to coincide with when her suspicious behavior began. The text indicated the first time they were together physically happened just that past Monday. Curiously, Melissa told me she went to the walk-in clinic after work on Monday for a burning urethra. This was all a huge lie, as she spent that time with her lover boy Rob. When she came home she told me she had been diagnosed with a UTI, a urinary tract infection, and we'd have to abstain for a while until she got rid of it. Looking back now, I have to admit the UTI excuse was brilliant, as it gave her an alibi for coming home late and an excuse for not having sex with me. I wanted nothing more than to confront her when she got back and throw her cheating self out, but I played it cool and contemplated my next move. What I eventually decided to do was to secretly abandon her without explanation. I already paid the 10th month of the 12-month apartment lease and only had 2 months remaining, with the final month being free of charge as part of the promotion I got when I renewed the lease. I really lucked out here. My plan was to get another place, and one day while she was at work I would move all my stuff to my new place and ghost her, and that's what I did. I got a new apartment 25 minutes away and arranged for a local moving franchise to move all my stuff out to my new place. The only furniture I left her was the spare bed and mattress. The day I moved out I went to the office and gave them my cancellation notice. I paid for the month 11 and explained to the leasing agent that I had already moved out, but my former girlfriend would likely be staying there through the end of the lease term. The leasing agent suggested we do a walkthrough together so she could take pictures of the current condition of the apartment in the event that anything was damaged during the final months of the lease. I agreed and we did just that. That was probably pretty smart. As it so happened, the day I moved out, Melissa and Rob had another rendezvous plan. She texted me in the afternoon stating that she had to work over and would be home about 90 minutes late. She said she would get takeout from our favorite place and bring it home for us. I said okay and gave her my order knowing I wouldn't be there. As expected, at around 7 o'clock she started blowing up my phone. First with multiple missed calls followed by a barrage of texts asking what was going on. Finally, after a couple hours of making her sweat, I called her. She answered crying and asked me what was going on. I told her that I knew all about Rob and that we were done. She was silent on the other end as I explained I had canceled the lease and she could live there through the end of the term. She then spoke up through tears, saying she could explain everything and that it's not what it seems. I told her to save it and to not make a fool of herself. She kept going on saying she was sorry for the misunderstanding and begging me, but at that point I had heard enough and hung up. The rest of the night she kept calling and texting, but I took a page out of her playbook and silenced my phone. I slept like a baby that night. The next morning I woke up and my voicemail box was full, so I deleted all her messages and then blocked her number, as having a full voicemail is a violation of company policy. As an account manager, I work mostly from the road, so she couldn't ambush me at the office. So now she had no way of reaching me since she didn't know where I was staying. I thought to myself, while I played this like a pro and got out of this bad situation with minimal damage. Well, I soon found out I wasn't completely rid of her. Remember her wacky parents? They still weren't done with me. A few weeks after I ghosted Melissa, I signed into Facebook for the first time in weeks, and to my surprise I saw numerous posts by Melissa's mom and replies from some of her friends. Her mom made several posts saying I was mentally abusive to her daughter, gave her an STD, and then abandoned her. Yes, and serious folks, this woman is so ignorant. She actually posted on the internet that her daughter had contracted an STD. The first thing I did after reading this was get tested myself, and thankfully the results came back all clear. Phew, says, thank God for that. I was so angry about the post I decided to sue Melissa's mom. I went to an attorney recommended by one of my coworkers, and he drafted a demand letter to Melissa's mom ordering her to stop making false claims against me and to immediately remove all current postings, as I would be suing her for libel and slander. The attorney advised me to follow through with suing her even if she complied. The same evening of the day that Melissa's mom received the letter from my attorney, I was confronted by Melissa's father outside of my apartment building. Now listen to this. He says, I don't know how he found out where I lived, but he did. He approached me from the back as I was walking up to the security doors at the front of the building. I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw it was him. Before I could do or say anything, he walked right over to me and grabbed me around the collar and neck and starts lifting me, saying, you son of a. I told him, hey, what are you doing? You're choking me. I then went into full survival mode. I jerked back away from him and with my right arm swung as hard as I could. My right fist connected directly with the side of his nose. I had never hit anything or anyone that hard before, and when I did I heard a loud crack. He immediately dropped to the ground, stumbling off holding his bleeding nose and screaming in agony. I started towards him to help, but then thought I'd better not and instead called the police, as this lunatic would be the type to falsely accuse me. I called the police, told them everything that happened, and they filed a report. I then told them my building has a security camera and I would call the office tomorrow to have them provide the tape. I called and they provided me with a 6-minute clip of the time in question. The video clip and sound clearly showed Melissa's dad ambushed me, grabbed me by the neck, and lifted me off the ground before I swung. After reviewing the footage, the investigating officer asked if I wanted to press charges. Based on what he saw in the tape, he recommended I do so. So I did and obtained a temporary restraining order. Since her parents live in a different jurisdiction, the officer said they would be back in touch in a few days with an update. Well, 2 days later I got a call from my attorney. He informed me that he had been contacted by an attorney representing Melissa's parents. Apparently they had received a letter from my attorney and her dad had been contacted by the local police. My attorney said their attorney told him they were willing to do anything to resolve these matters with me, as they didn't want to be sued and her father didn't want a criminal record. Though I wanted nothing more for them to sweat and suffer a little, in the end I agreed not to sue them and to drop the charges against her father. In exchange they both agreed to a full written confession of guilt for both the libel/slander and for the unprovoked attack. Her mother also was ordered to post a statement on her Facebook account for 6 months explaining that all the previous statements she made about me were false. Like I said, I really would have liked to make both of these maggots suffer, but I was just glad to finally be done with this family, but unfortunately the fun didn't stop there. About 6 months later, I was out at a bar with several of my coworkers when I ran into a woman who used to work with Melissa. I always liked this woman as she seemed genuine. In our conversation, she proceeded to let me know that Melissa is pregnant and was probably close to her due date now. She then told me it was known that Melissa and Rob had a thing, and they told people in the office they both were in open relationships. She said about a month or so after I broke up with Melissa, Rob left the company, and she later heard he divorced his wife. Now listen to this. She said the rumor is that Rob's wife contracted HSV-2, that's herpes, through one of her open marriage partners and gave it to Rob, who then gave it to Melissa. See what promiscuity without protection gets you? I again thank God I found out about this and broke up with her before she infected me, but that wasn't everything. She said Melissa had told everyone that the baby she's carrying is mine and that after it's born she hoped we can reconcile. He says, what the? There's no way the baby was mine based on the date, so I immediately contacted my attorney and had him send a cease and desist letter to her. Later I found out through the same former co-worker of Melissa that she had given birth to a little boy, and the poor kid acquired HSV-2 during birth from his mother and almost didn't survive. Apparently the virus is very dangerous to infants. That poor kid. While I despise that entire family, I feel really bad for that baby being born into the world with an incurable STD he got from his mother. Poor kid, I hope he grows up and lives a healthy and successful life. He says, well, that's my nightmare relationship story. As I said, I'm not looking for anything, I just wanted to share my story for what it's worth. May you live well, Nigel. So that's the end of his story, and he doesn't have any updates, but he did get a number of replies to his post, and in some of the replies he responded to some questions. So let's take a look at those now, but before we do, I want to remind you, if you like what you've heard so far, be sure to hit the like button. That will make sure this video gets seen by people all over the planet. So now let's take a look at some of those questions he got and his replies back to the people that responded to him. The first one's from a guy. He says, have you had any contact with Melissa since this happened? The OP says, thankfully I haven't. The last time we communicated was 7+ years ago. I don't know what happened to her or her parents. They deleted all their social media accounts after our fiasco. I wish them well, especially the child who was born into that horrible family with a terrible disease. And I have to agree with this guy, I didn't realize that this herpes virus could be so deadly to newborns, but I looked it up after reading this story and it's just a terrible condition, and I do feel sorry for that kid. I don't know the kid, of course, but I feel really bad for a kid that would be born into the world like that, acquiring herpes from his mother, and that's something he's going to have for the rest of his life. So I too wish this young kid nothing but the best, and I hope he has a very prosperous and successful and happy life. Next we got another question from a guy. He says, why didn't you drop the charges against her, old man? If that were me, I would have done everything I could have to put that idiot in jail. The OP responds and he says, I hear you, but you have to understand, I just wanted to be done with them and to get my life back on track. I accomplished that, and I'm happy with the outcome and how I handled things. I sure learned some valuable lessons. When I look back at this, he said that her dad was a high school football coach. I bet her dad was used to going up to his players and grabbing them by the shoulder pads and maybe lifting them off the ground. So I think he probably approached the OP that way when he confronted him outside of his apartment building, not expecting that the OP was going to react in a defensive posture and then just slug him, which he should have, because that's totally self-defense in that case. Like I've said in all my videos, I'm totally against violence, but in the case of self-defense I think it's absolutely warranted. And then finally a question from a woman. Now listen to what she says. She says, what's your relationship status now? Are you married or seeing anyone currently? She says, P.S. I'm available, wink wink. The OP responds and says, I'm not married and don't ever intend to, but I've been seeing a great woman for the past 3 years and would like to build a family with her someday. She's younger, so we still got time. And that's a good point that the OP makes. He wants to go out and build a family with this woman, but as he says here, he's never getting married. So guys, remember that you can go out and build a family with a woman. Have children with her, you don't have to get married. And now with that, I want to cover what I think are the morals of this story. And there were a ton of them. The first one, never rush into a relationship. These situations rarely turn out well. And you see what happened to this guy. What did he do? I mean, he moved this woman into his apartment after 5.5 months and then started paying all of her bills. Huge mistake. Number two, if her parents are crazy, there's a chance she could be as well. And I would say there's a very good chance she could be as well. And you know the old saying about never sticking you're in crazy? That applies here. Number three, always keep your cool and never employ violence unless it is a case of self-defense like I just said. Number four, ghosting is by far and away the best way to break up with the cheater. Because guess what, you don't have to deal with all the nonsense and all the lies they're going to try to spin to you. And all the begging and the pleading. Nope, you just walk away clean. Yeah, you're still going to be broken up inside, but you're going to get over it much faster because guess what, you took back control of the situation. And finally, living a great life is the best possible revenge. I'm sure this Melissa has followed this Nigel's life over time and she's probably just beating herself up saying he was mine and I blew it. I let him get away. He's the one that got away. He's living a great life now and my life is absolutely miserable. He's totally forgotten about me. Meanwhile, I'm thinking about him every day. I guarantee that's what's going on with her. So those are my thoughts, people. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Have you ever gone through something like this? Tell us about